24th of June, 2010, and this is the beginning of an interview with Major Kert chew-een Lee, who's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. We're here in the Information Center of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. My name is Tom Weiner. Operating the camera today is my colleague Jamie Stevenson, and also here for the interview are Serge Morisoff of Congressman Mike Conway's office and Frank Collier, who is with the United States Marine Corps. Major Lee, could you spell your name, tell us what service you were in, just for the record, and your dates of service and your highest rank?
My name is Kert chew-een Lee, K-U-R-T-C-H-E-W hyphen E-E-N-L-E-E.
And what service were you in?
And I'm in the U.S. Marine Corps.
And what were your dates of service?
My dates of service were about 10 April 1944 to 12/31/1968.
Okay, and your highest rank?
And my highest rank was as a major.
Okay, good. Well, let's start from the beginning. Tell us where you were born and what your family was like when you were growing up, your family life.
I was born in California. At the time, my father was active in the Sacramento River Delta area with the Chinese community that settled around that area.
Mm-hmm.
But my father took my mother to San Francisco for my birth, because he wanted to be sure that if he were to have a son, that things would turn out right. And similarly, he had taken my eldest sister was born in San Francisco.
The better hospitals or?
It was at I'm not sure, other than that I know that there was a Western doctor involved with the birth certificate.
Okay.
and all.
And your parents were first generation immigrants?
My father was born in Hawaii, and came to the States, I think, when he was about 14. I mean, the mainland, and became quite active in the Chinese community of that particular area now, because they were his people, so to speak. And those Chinese were a little different from most of the Chinese who settled on the mainland, who speak a more sing-song dialect of Cantonese. His people settled mainly in Hawaii. The Chinese there speak our language, so to speak. He was active as a young man in his 20s as a political activist and fundraiser for Dr. Sun Yat-sen, for example, and was commended by Dr. Sun, of which he was very proud, because Dr. Sun came from the same area in China that his family came from, and there was a lot of pride in that. My mother married him. He went back in an arranged marriage, and when my mother was 18, and brought her to the States, where she was treated quite especially by the rural wives in the Chinese community. My mother had the advantage of being educated, so to speak. She was a highly literate woman. That was, I wouldn't say rare, but unusual at the time. And she was taught how to cook, and be a proper housewife, I suppose, by the farm ladies who just adored her when she was brought in as a new bride.
Now, did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have. There were 7 kids in our family, 4 boys and 3 girls. I have 2 older sisters. I was the firstborn male child, and we were brought up in Sacramento, basically.
And you attended school there?
We attended American public schools, and but also Chinese language school after the American public school sessions. Mm-hmm. And my father was very adamant in our having proper Chinese acculturation, and all the kids were sent to Chinese school, private school, which ended up a long day, because as I said once before to some other friends, our public schools stopped at about 3:30. We had to rush home and to eat and so forth, so that we can be at the Chinese school. We had to walk about half an hour to go to Chinese school, but be there by 5 o'clock. And it did not secure until 9 o'clock, from 5 to 9. And then on Saturdays, from 9 to 12. And so we kids were given a large dosage of so-called education, but I can assure you that we were really not that serious in picking up Chinese language, mainly because personally I could not understand the teachers. They were speaking in that sing-song dialect of Cantonese, and it was very difficult for me to understand what they were saying. So the time was spent doodling, I suppose, in class, and I thought it was unfair to my parents. But yet, my brothers and sisters and I ended up always 1, 2, 3, 4 listed after each semester in Chinese school. They list your class standings, and I felt that these other Chinese kids must be pretty dumb, quite frankly, because with half an effort, my family was always on top, and because we spoke a different brand of Chinese, we were really the butt of jokes by them. My family name used the word in our dialect, chew. My name is chew-een. My sister's name, Faustina's name, was chew-kwan. And Betty's name was chew-fung. And right down the line, the chew part adds a superlative quality to the next letter, character. My sister, Chiu Kwan, for example, Kwan means a group of people, so she's superior to in a group of people.
Mm. Now, let me ask you, how old were you when the attack on Pearl Harbor came? And do you remember that day?
Well, I'm not sure how old I was. I guess I can go back by years. I was born in 1926, and 41 was Pearl Harbor. So,
were you in school? You were obviously, it was a Sunday, so you weren't in school. But do you remember hearing the news?
well, yes. One of the things that we had operating in our family was the radio. It was on at all times, and I not only did we learn about it, but almost immediately the papers came out and in Sacramento. And those were the days when you have news kids running around, extra, extra, here, read all about it, and about being attacked by the Japanese and so forth. Yes, I, at that point, kept up pretty much with world events, particularly with the Sino-Japanese War since 1937. When I was a kid, I collected pictures and magazines and Chinese magazines, and was horrified at the pictures. They had no censorship in those days, particularly from foreign magazines, I suppose. So they have very graphic, ugly pictures of the atrocities.
So you were aware of those, say, what happened in Nanking?
Exactly. What had happened at Nanking, the mutilation and torture, showing bodies of disemboweled women and of Japanese troops beheading Chinese prisoners and using them, live prisoners, for bayonet practice and killing them and tossing their bodies in dumps and all that. I was aware of all that.
So you were 15 at the time of Pearl Harbor, obviously too young to serve, but you, as you said before, you did join the Marines in 1944. So you were just 18 at that time, right?
When I joined the Marines, I claimed to have enlisted in it, but in truth, I was inducted into the military service. And but we were given the option, the group of draftees lined up who wants to join the Marines. And
why did you want to join the Marines?
When I found out that they were the first to fight and that people were avoiding it and all that, and I thought it was the perfect vehicle for me. I've had my own conception of duty in uniform even before I wore the uniform, and that to do your duty for your country, that you should be prepared to die. And the Marines, even at that point in time, when I learned they were to be the first to fight and all that, and the Marine Corps gives you a high dosage of Marine Corps history and traditions in part of the indoctrination, but it's very easy for me to identify my own personal ideas with those of the Marine Corps.
I see. Where did you train?
I trained, I hate to say it, but I'm considered one of the Hollywood Marines because we train in San Diego Marine Corps Recruit Depot.
Mm-hmm. Did you expect to be shipped out to fight in the Pacific War?
I had wanted. I expected to be shipped out. My boot camp platoon finished in, I guess, went in April, probably in June of 1944, and I expected to be with my boot camp buddies. Most of them ended up in the 28th Marines. They were the ones who landed on Iwo Jima and went up to Mount Suribachi. And
why didn't you go with them?
I was very disappointed when they pulled me from the group to assign me to, of all things, a language school to learn Japanese. And
do you think they pulled you because you were Asian?
They pulled me because, not necessarily because I was the only Asian in my class.
Were you?
I was. Virtually in any class I'm in, the Marine Corps did not have many Asian Marines for whatever reason. I think most Chinese Americans, for example, avoided the Marines, whether they're knowledgeable of their reputation of being of their rough macho image, and I guess a lot of Chinese Americans did not feel they met that particular image. My point was that I want to remove the stereotype of Chinese Americans, and I was very well versed in Chinese history and of the martial prowess of past dynasties when the art of warfare was developed to a high degree, and also the physical prowess of the warriors were well known in Chinese history. And the funny thing is that I learned a lot of that from my mother.
Oh, really?
My mother used to read about the stories of the Three Kingdoms, which is a period in China after the Han Dynasty, in which there were very famous Chinese generals, and I learned the names as a kid. And the funny thing about it is that I don't recall my brothers sitting around listening to my mother's reading.
It was directed at you more than them.
She read aloud and explained things. Normally she would read by herself, but when I'm around, I express interest, and then she would read aloud and explain different passages to me. And so I got to be familiar with all of these big general figures in history.
So you were pulled to go to language school to learn Japanese, and the idea was what?
The idea was that, well, a lot depends on, not because I was Asian, I suppose, but they felt that it was more a matter of GCT, general, was the classification test, I guess, and which I had a relatively high score. The fellow students in that group were all virtual intellectuals. People who were drafted, a couple of college professors and all that, but all privates. They apparently did not meet the qualification to be officers. But I think that has more to do with it, and also many Americans would feel that, oh, Chinese, Japanese, what's the difference? You know, probably if he was Chinese, it would be easier for him to learn Japanese. The only thing was that other than the Japanese use of Chinese characters, and but the Japanese language is quite different grammatically and so forth from Chinese.
So your World War II experience was all stateside then?
Unfortunately, I was after I graduated from this 6-month course of Japanese language, the attrition rate was very high, for example, starting with about 16 or 18 students. After much screening, only 2 or 3 would graduate. The others would be dropped somewhere along the way. But I was selected to be an instructor of that school, which further demoralized me, because I was expecting to go to the field.
And use your language skills in the field?
Yes, to be Japanese language interpreters, because they go with the frontline Marines to try to coax Japanese out of caves before they are destroyed if necessary, if they don't come out. So there is risk, but I look forward to that. But I was kept back as an instructor.
And so you were there at the end of the war?
I was promoted at the same time. The advantage was that I suddenly became a sergeant. And they gave me that promotion. And when the war ended, by that time, I was telling myself, of course, none of us knew that the war would end. But I was saying that if I were going to be kept stateside, I might as well go to college and finish my education in the NROTC program. They call it the V12 program at the time.
So did you stay a Marine, or did you get discharged from the Corps?
I remained a Marine from the beginning, and when the war ended, I was already selected for officer screening.
Oh, I see. And where did you go to officer candidate school?
Well, at that time, it was not an officer candidate school. The school to produce Marine officers, regular officers, was called the Basic School, and it was located up in Philadelphia. In all of the prior years of Marine Corps history, everybody went there, including people like Chester Puller and my battalion commander and all that. But when World War II started, officers had to be mass produced, and they were all reserve officers, and no more regular commissions were given out. When the war ended in August of 1945, they moved that school from Philadelphia down to Quantico and reactivated the school. And I was in the very first regular officers class convened by that school. And it was moved there in September, and in October I was in that first class.
This is 1945?
But in order to qualify, I had to pass the 4-year college equivalency test, and which I did so without any problem, quite frankly.
So you decided to stay in the Marines even though the war was over?
I was, quite frankly, ashamed to be discharged. What? A Marine sergeant? Where's your Purple Heart? Where are your battle stars? It was very embarrassing, quite frankly. And since there was a chance to become an officer and all, I decided to stay in, and I was enough of a student of history to know that it won't be long before America would be in another war, and I want to be an officer at that time.
What did you do briefly between World War II and Korea, the start of the Korean War? Where were you?
World War II.
Between the two wars, where were you stationed?
When I was commissioned in April of 1946, we were the only basic school class that were totally enlisted. We remained enlisted persons while going through the course. We wore our enlisted uniform. I wore my 3 stripes. There were PFCs, and there were gunnery sergeants, or technical sergeants with 5 stripes. And many of them were Pacific War veterans, all with a enthusiasm, true blue Marines, to want to stay in the Marine Corps, and I learned a lot from those veterans. And were not commissioned until the day we graduated, after 6 months, and then we had the bars pinned on us. And in my life, when I entered the Marine Corps, I pretty much divorced myself from my family, which was another deep personal regret of mine, particularly with respect to my mother. It was unfair to her.
So you didn't keep in touch and
I
didn't
did
go
not keep
home
in
very
touch.
much?
I did not go home very much. In that sense, I was a very selfish person, self-centered in all the way, and I wanted to make a career of something new, and I dedicated all my efforts to that.
So was that true throughout your Marine Corps career, or did you eventually kind of...
It's pretty much so, even in my marriage, for example, and all that. My family knew nothing about it. I did not confide in them on this, and that. My graduation from Quantico, I did not inform them of that. There was nobody there to pin bars on my uniform except 2 instructors. In my marriage, my family was not present because they didn't know about it. I was pretty much a lone wolf, I suppose, and, in a sense, although my family maintained their loyalty and love. Okay.
So where were you when the Korean War broke out?
You mentioned the service before the Korean War. When I was commissioned, I was assigned to first temporarily to a Marine brigade at Camp Lejeune, which dissolved because they were all Pacific War veterans waiting to get off, and it was sort of ridiculous to have amphibious landing exercise composed of these veterans and all that. But anyway, that was just to mark time a little bit, and I had orders to go to China with a lot of my classmates, and I ended up with the 5th Marine Regiment in, at that time it's called Beiping, Northern Peace instead of Northern Capital, Beijing. And so I was stationed in China with the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, as a platoon commander.
Was that the first time you'd been to China?
That was the first time in China.
Was your language skill useful to you?
No, my language skills.
Well, you went to Chinese school.
I went to Chinese school, and I learned nothing Cantonese out there because of the instructors. I said, I did not learn that particular dialect. And my father could speak that dialect very well, and he was pretty good in several Chinese dialects.
So it was like going home, but you weren't really home because it was, I mean,
well,
these were your people, but you couldn't communicate.
I don't know why you say going home.
Well, in the sense that that's your heritage.
Well, that may be so, but I tell you, there was a disadvantage. And
in what way?
The disadvantage was that I did not speak Mandarin.
Oh.
And I was forced to speak English. And then the Chinese got very uptight about that. Here is a Chinese. Just because he wears the American uniform, he's too good to speak Chinese. And there was that impression. And so I did not have very high standing among those people like that. And but unavoidable. I could not converse with them.
Sure. Were you stationed in China when the Korean War broke out?
No, from Beijing, I went to Guam for about 8 months on temporary duty there with the Fifth Service Depot, and then requested to go back to China, and they sent me back to Tsingtao, and so I was assigned to the Third Marines there as a platoon commander, but by October of 1948, and this was before the communists really took over, I was rotated back to the States, and was assigned to Marine Barracks at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo, California. And it was there where I was stationed for about a year or two, and made first lieutenant there. And when the war broke out, and I was assigned to Camp Pendleton to be part of the 1st Marine Division, and where I was assigned to the 7th Marines, which was reactivated, and the 1st Battalion, which was reactivated from scratch, and we had to rebuild and organize and train. Had a full 2 weeks to do it before we shipped out for war.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. And I had to make use of the 2 weeks' time aboard ship to do what I could to teach my men. At that time I was assigned to the machine gun platoon, and to teach them. We couldn't do any gun drills up there, but taught them tactics on the support of rifle troops. And when we landed, my machine gunners knew more about tactics than any of the rifle people, and all. And,
where did you land?
well, we went in as reserve for the 1st Marine Division at Incheon.
Mm-hmm. When was this? When did you land?
This was about a week after the 1st Marines and the 5th Marines were already ashore at Incheon, their assault landing, and were already at the gates of the city of Seoul, and we landed to support them in the battle for the city of Seoul.
So this would have been the fall? Would this have been the fall of 1950?
This was in September of 1950.
Okay.
Yeah. And so...
yeah, go ahead.
My company was first blooded out there, first exposure to combat, in blocking the North Koreans from escaping, moving north, while the 5th Marines and the 1st Marines were plowing through the city in street fighting and all that.
So the strategy was to encircle the North Koreans rather than just drive them back north, was to try to capture them or eliminate them?
Well, we were trying to destroy the enemy.
Yeah. So there wasn't a sense of pushing them north,
no,
so much as engaging them and fighting them right there.
This is true. We want to engage them and to prevent their escape, as a matter of fact, and to capture them, to put them out of action. Mm-hmm. If they were allowed to continue north, they would just turn around and re-equip and continue to fight us. So it doesn't make sense to allow them to escape. Yeah. So that was a mission to block them. And
how long did this fighting go on?
It went on until let's see, we were there from 20th of September. And by the 5th or 6th of October, I think, we pretty much had the city secured, and we were sent down to Incheon to re-outfit and to reorganize and all. And we went aboard ship on the 12th of October to go to North Korea. We didn't know it at the time. It was a top secret mission. But just on the day before we boarded ship, who should show up at Incheon in a jeep but my brother. My brother was released from the Army hospital in Japan.
Well, wait a minute. Let's backtrack a little bit here. He was in the Army already?
Yes, I think
when did he join?
It's important. My brother was in the Army. He got commissioned going through the Army Special Training Program.
Uh-huh. And did he join during World War II or after?
No. World War II was over.
Okay.
My brother was 2 years younger than me.
Okay, so he was too young to join during the war, but he.
Right, but in 1948, I think that was when he was commissioned.
Okay.
And his first assignment was to Korea as an Army advisor.
So he was there when the war started?
No.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
Before the war started.
Okay.
And he was there. I guess you were not present when I was discussing this matter with a number of people, including the congressman. My brother was an Army advisor of a battalion of South Koreans. And he did a great job out there, very conscientious and dedicated. And his men, the South Koreans, all really almost worshipped him and respected him. And his fellow Army advisors, on the other hand, did not do the job. And this is why they had such a disastrous performance when the chips were down and the war broke out and the Army was first sent to Korea. My brother said that the Army advisors, his fellow friends, wasted the time with the local village bells and filed fictitious reports about training that was never done. And so Far Eastern headquarters in Japan was not really aware of the state of training of the South Koreans because of this type of hanky-panky going on.
Yeah. So now you crossed paths with them when you went back to Incheon to take the ship up to North Korea, not knowing that you were going, and he happened to be in Incheon at the same time. You said you.
No, okay. Let me backtrack a little bit.
Sure, that's all right.
When we were going to Korea aboard ship, and we had to stop by Japan, as I indicated, for a day or two to complete the reorganization of the 7th Marines. A battalion was being flown out to Japan to join the 7th Marines as its 3rd battalion.
Okay.
It was a fully constituted regular battalion from the 2nd Marine Division. And while in Japan for the 2 days when this took place, who should come aboard ship but my brother. He heard the Marines were there. He was wounded in the Busan perimeter, fighting with the American 2nd Infantry Division. After his Korean tour, he was sent back to the States, to Fort Lewis, to join the 2nd Infantry Division, which was sent out when the war broke out. And he was a member of these. At that time, he was a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle unit commander. And that was when he was wounded in Busan, and the Marines came and saved him.
Okay. So he came aboard your ship.
And we had a brief reunion. They did not lift the gangplank until 5 or 10 minutes went by, and he tried to fill me in on the details about how great the Marines were in saving him and all that. And also hearing, while he was in the hospital, the broadcast by Seoul City Sue, who was broadcasting, a female. It's like Tokyo Rose during World War II. But this broadcaster was reading letters captured from another heroic American dead. And this was my brother's wife's letters to him. And the North Koreans picked up his knapsack and all that.
After he was wounded?
After he was wounded, he burrowed into a haystack and remained there. And I guess he left his pack outside. And when the North Koreans had crossed the Naktong River and all that, the next day was when the Marines had landed. The 1st Special Marine Brigade, mainly the 5th Marines, landed. The 3rd Battalion did a great job out there.
So you saw him aboard the ship for a few minutes.
Yes,
and then he headed back, and you headed on.
And he heard these reports.
Yeah, they read his letters as though he were dead.
Read the letters and all, and he thought it was amusing. But anyway, we just had time for about no more than 10 minutes of meeting, and he had to leave because we were set to sail. And after the city, the battle for Seoul, and I was down at Incheon ready to go aboard ship.
I see.
And here comes chew-een, my brother, in an army jeep. He had been released, and he was rejoining his unit, the 2nd Infantry Division, which was moving north on the western side of the peninsula, while I was boarding ship to go to the eastern side of Wonsan to go up to the Chosin Reservoir area. But anyway, my brother provided me with some army equipment, new belt suspenders, and banana clips, we call them, for the carbine.
Yeah.
The Marines didn't have that. We just had the regular 15-round magazines. Here are the banana clips with 30 rounds, and if you tape 2 of them together, you have 60 rounds available. And for that reason, I felt very fortunate. And he went on up north, and he eventually got badly wounded again, and again abandoned by his men when things were rough. And the 8th Army was routed by the Chinese when they attacked. And on the other hand, on the eastern front at the Chosin Reservoir, where I was at that time, we were hit the day after the 8th Army was hit. And we heard about the army being routed, and my brother wrote in his memoirs horrible details about the panic of the American troops running dropping their weapons, their packs, and running in panic. And he was defenseless to stop them, and at the same time shouting for them to stop and all that. He found himself running with them, but he broke away from them. He said he witnessed army tanks with army troops crowded behind the tanks, and the tanks moving, crushing their own soldiers, and it was a horrible scene. And my brother finally crossed the river with a group of army people, and he rallied them to return back, to go back to the fight, and did a tremendous job, and was badly wounded there at that time. And he received the Distinguished Service Cross fighting in that particular battle.
Was he the only brother you had who served in the military?
No, he was my Buck was 1 year younger than I. Chew-een, who was this officer, was 2 years younger than I. Buck was a pacifist, but he was in the Army Reserve. He was a pharmacist. But he was sent to Korea also as the first lieutenant. And but I felt that he did a tremendous job. Now, I and my brother Chew-een were career military officers. We were trained in infantry tactics and all. My brother Buck took over some medical motor transport unit or something, and his job was to send motor convoys up to pick up casualties and all that. And he was hit by his convoy by mortar fire by the Chinese, and the wounded troops were falling out of the trucks and all that, and all his men were in the ditches and taking cover, and my brother alone stood up, and with mortar shells exploding around, he pulled wounded soldiers to safety and all that. And he received the Bronze Star for that with the Combat V, I guess. And I thought that took a lot of courage for a so-called pacifist.
So 3 of you were serving in Korea?
Yes.
At the same time?
No, my brother Chew-een and I were evacuated in 1950 because of war wounds. And my brother, Buck was actually
Buck.
my second brother.
Yeah.
Chew-fan was the Chinese name.
Yeah.
He went to Korea in 1951.
I see.
Yeah.
So 3 of you were there, but only 2 at a time. You and your...
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So let's talk about the Chosin Reservoir, because that's a very, very important event in the Korean War, and you were there, you saw a lot, you experienced a lot. Describe when you got to the Chosin Reservoir, what were the expectations? Were people assuming that the North Koreans were in retreat, were being beaten, and what was the mood?
No, when we landed at Wonsan and moved north by foot and by motor to the city of Hamhung, and from there we went north towards the Chosin Reservoir, and this was around the 1st of November, and that was where we encountered the first Chinese troops. We were attacked at midnight by what turned out to be the 124th Infantry Division of Chinese regular unit, and This was far south of the Chosin Reservoir.
I see. So you weren't even at the reservoir when the Chinese attacked you?
We were attacked, and we pretty much, we didn't destroy, but incurred heavy damage, many casualties on the enemy, and they withdrew. And from that point on, we were sending out company-sized patrols to determine where they were at, and so forth as we moved north towards the Chosin Reservoir.
Did the attack by the Chinese come as a surprise to you?
Yes and no, because if you listen to the radio reports, which I did continuously when we were aboard ship, that the Chinese were bluffing, that they would never enter the war. And, but the South Koreans that we relieved at Sudong, this was the place of action, claimed that there were many Chinese there, and they had a couple of prisoners with them who were Chinese, and which we sent back to battalion headquarters, and we went up there and took over the South Korean positions on this high ground, and redeployed the people up there and constructed Marine Corps defenses, not the South Korean defenses.
What's the difference between a Marine defense and a South Korean defense?
I don't know how the South Koreans were trained, or how the Army was trained and all that, but to me, a proper defense has to have the firepower totally coordinated, to have all-around perimeter defense and all that. It's better planned and integrated, and all possible enemy approaches would be covered by registered fire mortars in cases like this, and with heavier mortars by 81s and all that. And I would not even hazard to guess what the South Koreans did in setting up the defenses. We just didn't occupy their holes. That's what.
So it was clearly not up to the standard that the Marines had.
No, nor would Army positions be accepted by the Marines.
Yeah.
Because I think we applied lessons of tactics a lot more. I wouldn't say more intelligently, because we all learned from the same schools, the same field manuals, but the Marines officers established the defenses and supervised the construction of these defenses, whereas the Army may establish defenses, but whether or not they're constructed by their troops is unknown. There may be gaps here and there. There just was not enough supervision, apparently, by Army officers, or whatever the reasons were. From my experiences, the Army had too many gaps in their defenses. But my experiences were only from reading about what they did east of the Chosin Reservoir, where they had one unit that was pretty much destroyed by the Chinese, with over 1,500 killed because they did not provide an effective defense. Whereas on the other side of the reservoir, when the Chinese hit with even greater numbers, we didn't suffer that many casualties, but we inflicted tremendous casualties on the enemy. So that's the difference. But after that Sudong battle, which which lasted about 2 or 3 days. That was where I was wounded the first time, and sent back to the Army Field Hospital in Ham Hung.
Okay, I think we're going to pause there so we can change the tape. So just hold that thought. All right, we're continuing the interview on June 24th, 2010 with Major Kert Chew-een Lee here at the Library of Congress. Major Lee, you were just talking about the first time you were wounded near the Chosin Reservoir. Could you describe what happened that day and how you were wounded?
In that particular action, the Chinese hit at midnight, and I stayed up all night and actually recovered the lost position. Our frontline dispositions were such that the first platoon was on the left and the third platoon on the right, and the second platoon was down in the valley, supposedly helping to provide security for the battalion command post. And but the first platoon position was breached by the enemy, and the Marines pulled back, and many casualties and all that. And when they attacked, all hell broke loose. The din of battle, the cacophony of explosions and gunfires ricocheting off the hills, and it was a very mountainous terrain, with very sharp, narrow valleys and all that. And amazingly, as I look out, the sky was almost lit with a tracer fire from the Marine positions against the enemy, but surprisingly, the enemy fire was also like the friendly fires. They were both red tracers heading for each other. This was attributed, obviously, to the Chinese use of captured nationalist ammunition, which were American ammunition, and so forth. It was different to me and amazing because fighting against the North Koreans, their tracers were Soviet ammunition, blue-green tracers as opposed to red tracers. And but anyway, then suddenly everything ceased in my particular sector there. But by that time, I was trying to reorganize the troops. My machine gun platoons were assigned out to attach to each rifle platoon because of the configuration of the terrain. There could be no central control of machine gun. So I was down at the company headquarters with the company commander as his machine gun advisor. But I immediately went forward a little bit and had my platoon sergeant help reestablish a defensive line and all. Then suddenly everything stopped, even though fire was going on across the valley, the battle. But in our sectors, there was almost eerie silence. Nobody knew where the enemy was. And I could sense palpable fear amongst the Marines. They didn't know what's going on. And that was when I decided, I would not say foolishly, it was a calculated risk is to move forward and to provoke the enemy to open fire, so that my men, they were giving instructions to at least understand where the enemy was at that point in time. So I moved forward there, and not foolishly, using cover and all, and fired not my weapon, but picking up abandoned Marine positions. And I assumed that many of them who had left weapons there were wounded and were pulled back. But I would find an M1 rifle here and there, grenades here and there. And at one point in time, I found a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle. I would pick up one of these weapons and strings of bandoliers of ammunition all over the place.
Now, when you say I was doing this, were you by yourself?
I was by myself because I didn't want to risk my runner to be with me, and because there was a risk involved.
Uh-huh.
And what I wanted to do was to have the enemy open fire at me.
So you want to draw the fire
Yes.
to you, and then your men could
My men
locate the enemy.
could determine the disposition. So I would fire a few rounds with a weapon, with the M1 rifle, for example, and roll around to another position and fire at a rapid rate or a single rate, and pick up a carbine and another carbine. I want to save mine with the banana clips and everything else for the real fight if it comes down to that. But the enduring fire, I used carbines, M1 rifles, fire at different rates, and toss a grenade or two at different times. And at one time I pulled, I'll tell you, those BARs are heavy. When you carried a carbine around for a while at 20 pounds and with a magazine in it, even more. But I would fire the BAR at rapid rate and at semi-automatic, and it just create the impression that they were all more than one person.
Uh-huh.
So that the enemy would not suddenly assault me in mass. And I kept moving forward and doing this, and only at one time did I sense the presence of an enemy crashing through the brush and all that. I don't know whether it was the enemy, an animal, or what, but I kept moving forward and doing this thing, and I didn't realize how long it took and all that. And suddenly I heard voices, Chinese voices, and realized that I must be, I didn't know where they were. I thought they were somewhere
Yeah.
in the boondocks out there.
Yeah.
And they were alerted. Apparently they heard me, and they started opening fire in my direction. And that was when I realized that I was almost on top of them, and so that was when I shouted, "Don't shoot! Don't! I'm Chinese." And I used Chinese at that point, and in fact I used Mandarin.
So you knew enough of it.
I knew a few phrases of it
Yeah.
and all that, but maybe they said, "That sounds like an American accent." They opened fire at
They
it.
didn't stop.
They didn't stop. And so I had 2 grenades left, and so I pulled the pins simultaneously and tossed one, followed a couple a second later by the other and to explode. And after the explosion, I got up and I was caught. I realized I was caught in a precarious position. Of course, I could have just faded away, I suppose. But then what? The Marines back there would consider me an enemy coming back, and so I decided to go on the assault, and after the explosions, and with my carbine set at full automatic and with 60 rounds of ammunition, I just sprayed the direction of the enemy, and I heard them shout, and whistles suddenly blew, and they stopped firing. And I continued moving forward, and I still have some ammo left, but I really did spray the area with, at least 50 rounds of carbine fire, and found several wounded Chinese propped up against the rocks, and many dead ones up there. But apparently the live Chinese had escaped. They went over the top of the rocks, and there was a deep drop of about 15 feet. And I suspect that was how they first got into the Marine position, that by stacking each other up in makeshift ladders, human ladders, or whatever. And some of their wounded were propped up with automatic weapons, and a couple of them were still alive, and I had to kill them. But others were already dead, and I find it so interesting what they did, and their badly wounded were to cover the withdrawal of the others. And there I found one of my machine guns off its positions, and apparently the enemy was trying to take it, and there were a couple of my machine gunners dead out there. By that time, the quarter moon had come out, and in Korea it shines very bright, and so I could detect, where the machine gun was, and recognize one of my dead machine gunners and all.
So this is all happening at night?
All this was happening at night, and just at that time, I realized that there was a change, and dawn was coming eventually. I could not risk being shot by the Marines, and when dawn came, I trooped the line, and I realized I was actually on top of the lost platoon position. I'd gone that far, and when I found it was secured, no more live people around, Marines nor enemy, and so I decided to wait for dawn to come.
Yes.
And when the first light came, and I stood on top and removed my helmet, and I had both good arms at that time, and waved and shouted for the Marines to come forward, and all this and all that, and saw the tree line. At nighttime, I had no idea how it looked, the terrain, and there was a tree line about a couple hundred yards away from this high ground position, and nothing happened. And then finally, I shouted that everything's all clear. This is Lieutenant Lee. But as you think about it, my voice could not help but have some Asian tinge to it. How the Marines would have felt seeing this guy out there waving the helmet. But they gradually came out and then moved forward. I guess they decided that it was me. Yeah. And they came forward, and I redisposed them in the positions out there, and finally walked back to my positions. And then I realized it was this platoon. I thought it was another platoon, but I recognized that it was the first platoon because it was the only one with a black sergeant, and in a sleeping bag, zipped up, but with one arm trying to claw open the zipper, with an arm with a sergeant's stripes, and the arm was black, and I knew it was this sergeant there, and I was very angry that he shouldn't have died, but he shouldn't have been in a sleeping bag, number one, or zipped up, and all that. And I walked past down, all the way down to the company commander's position, and he stood up there. I saw him and his exec standing up in the foxhole, and you know what he said to me?
No.
He said, "Pretty rough up there, wasn't it?" I just gave him a look and walked on past to my position, and took off my carbine to hang up on a small tree by my position when a shot rang out, and I was hit by a sniper.
So all that running around and you were never hit, and then you got back and you thought you were safe.
It's the same way we went throughout the chosen reservoir fighting. I was exposed all the time, and it wasn't until the end of the last battle we're in, after we pretty much had accomplished the mission, as far as I'm concerned, in breaking out, and all, when I was hit the second time. But anyway,
the first time you were hit, where were you hit?
I was hit on the elbow. It glanced off me, and it could have shattered my elbow had it been a fraction of an inch. My arm was up another way, but it was very painful. It was like a sledgehammer. It hit me and picked me up and spun me around, and I damaged my knee when I rode down the hill. But anyway.
Did you get medical help?
Immediately, the Marines came to help me. And
did they have to evacuate you to an aid station?
Yes, I had to be evacuated, and I limped to the battalion aid station, and there are so many wounded Marines out there, and many with very serious wounds, and I was there, and Dr. Wiedemeyer, he was our battalion surgeon, dressed my wounds and said, I have to go back to the Army Field Hospital for treatment. And then I noticed, and there was a book, who was Martin Rust's book, Breakout. I think did me a disservice. It made me seem like I was browbeating a poor defenseless little PFC there, which was not. What happened was this. I heard moaning and groaning, and I turned and looked and saw 3 big hulking Marines sitting together, and they were moaning, making noise and so forth, and I walked over to them, said, what's the matter? What's happened with you people? And they said, oh, I saw my buddy killed and all this and all that. And I said, were any of you hurt in any way? They kept blubbering around, not about themselves, but about seeing this, seeing that. And I said, knock off that crap. Do you see these Marines out here? You see that one there with his gut spilling out of his open stomach? Do you hear him make any sound? I said, you people should be back at your position, manning the lines out there. And but whatever happened, I don't want to hear another peep out of you people. And they shut up. And I walked back there. The book says that one poor little PFC was out there, and I was saying all these nasty things to him and all that. And this is the license that authors take, and either they weren't listening that well or whatever it was.
Yeah, they get it from the wrong source.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you? Did he ever
Oh yes,
interview you?
he's a friend of mine, Martin Russ.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, he was the only author that I really gave material to.
Oh, I see.
And,
well,
he had many tapes made of my interview with me.
yeah. Well, let's talk about your second. What led up to your being wounded a second time? Because I think that was more dramatic because you were trying to rescue some.
I want to say something else too.
Yeah.
When I was back at the Army hospital, wounded were still coming south from Sudan. The battle was still going on for 2 or 3 days after I was wounded. The 124th Chinese Division was still up there, and I explained, but I'm saying this again because this is for the record, and that I heard that the second platoon, some of the wounded people had come back, and that they encountered a tank for the first time, and that the platoon commander turned and ran, and all the rest of his men, this was members of the 2nd Rifle Platoon, the platoon I eventually took over, they ran in a panic, and Joe Owens, who was our mortar section leader, the guy that I was not too impressed with, quite frankly. Because he had his men call me Joe and all that kind of stuff. And, but I heard that Joe Owens stood up in the path of these Marines running back and physically corralled one of them and picked him up and threw him back, and shouting for them to stop running and all that. And they stopped the panic. When I heard that, and as I said, well, Joe probably has some possibilities, and my opinion of him changed at that point. And he did a tremendous job as a mortar officer.
Good. Well, let's get to the second time you were wounded and the events leading up to that.
Yeah. Well, instead of being sent to Japan at that aid station, that was the plan. And I had a mortar section leader who was wounded in his thigh, a flesh wound, And I told him that I've got to get back to the company. And so what we did was to take an Army Jeep. And we said we liberated an Army Jeep in order to return to our position. And as we left the compound with the driver protesting and all that, and a couple of these cracker box type ambulances suddenly seemed to be moving after we left the gate, and I looked back and saw these two vehicles coming after us. And I said, step on the gas, move out, they're after us. And we careen around that little village and to get out on the road, and those trucks kept coming, stayed back behind us. And we went out on a levee road. The single road that went forward was actually the top of, it was a levee of rice paddies on both sides. A single road, which were down about 5 or 6 feet, all dried because of the season at that point. And so I kept telling him, drive faster. And he said, I'm floorboarding there, sir. I can't go any faster. And we were going at top speed along there. But the Army trucks were still behind us. And then I saw suddenly, and the driver saw at the same time, ahead of us, a hairpin turn. 90 degrees to the left. No signs of anything. We were going so fast there that there's no way to avoid tipping over. And, we sailed off that road. Even kill. We were going so fast. and I was afraid to breathe. Afraid that the Jeep would tilt and crash. And in my mind, here we are coming all the way to fighting Korea and die of an auto accident.
Yeah.
How disgraceful, And that Jeep suddenly landed on 4 wheels. Landed, and because I told Sergeant Keller was his name, said Sergeant Keller, keep it straight, and it bounced and rode to a stop, and we just looked at each other, and suddenly burst out laughing. The Jeeps, the 2 trucks following us, negotiated that curve. They were used to that road, and move on past. They were not after us at all. They were on their own mission.
So you weren't being chased.
We were not being chased, and all this time we risked our lives, trying to escape. So anyway, the Jeep wasn't damaged, so we came back on the road and came back to the 1st Battalion area where I walked to look for where Baker Company was, and we shot the company. And then we moved north towards the reservoir.
Right. So you were involved with the withdrawal from the Chosin Reservoir, is that right?
We not only the withdrawal, the 7th Marines, because they were the division reserves on the Western Front, city of Seoul fighting and all that, now became the lead regiment in the move north. And my company, Baker Company, was the 1st Battalion was the lead of the 7th Regiment. And on the way north, move up to Hagaroo, and from Hagaroo, Tokton Pass, which was the big Fox Company stand place, was north of Hagaroo, about 2 or 3 or 4 miles. And the Chinese, we encountered the Chinese up there, members of this 124th Division. They put up a fight, our first fight since Sudan, and overcame them without any problem. And continuing moving forward up to Udamni, and my battalion was in the lead. And by that time I had taken over the 2nd Rifle Platoon, and I had to retrain them practically as we move forward. And we were at the lead, and again without interruption. And by that point in time, I realized that their platoon was pretty well trained. We had no sergeants. All my squad leaders were corporals. The sergeants had been evacuated for one reason or another. And there were times when we were on ridge lines so steep that we had to go single file, almost razorback, with slopes going down 45, 60 degrees. And in order to negotiate a blind turn, I had my men reconnoiter it by fire. And it's a very difficult place and all that, but we were the first to reach Udamni in my company. And at the same time, the 5th Marines were moving down on the road, and eventually they went into the town of Udamni, but we were on the high ground where we remained until the so-called breakout, and we tried to fight our way back, because the Fox Company in the meantime had occupied that vital high ground on this Tokton Pass. And the Chinese knew how strategic it was, and sent a couple of regiments against this one Marine company up there, which held off for 4 to 5 days under heavy attacks and suffered heavy casualties. And our mission, we tried 2 times to go by the road to break through to reach that pass to secure it. And were turned back at both times because of Chinese roadblocks and all. And so the idea was that 3-5, the 5th Marines would go on the road, and at the same time, the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines would go on the high ground on the left, heading south. But instead of going down into the road, we would cut across country and Ansman's Burying towards Fox Hill, which was about 5 miles away by crow's flight. And this, as it turned out, had to be done at nighttime, because by the time we reached the Kickoff Point, and we suffered many casualties. Chinese were really deeply entrenched up there. And when we reached it, and I thought that we were going to dig in up there for the night before moving on, and was disposing my people in a hasty defense up there. When the word came to report to the company commander, he just came back from a battalion and said, we'll continue the attack at 9 o'clock, and that we will be heading cross country. In that battalion, the company commander told me, want you, me, to be the point, to lead the point unit. And
why do you think you were singled out?
Because the battalion commander had faith in me. It's just a simple matter. And
Was it as a result of your action earlier, do you think? When you were doing that?
We were, you know, we were in many cumulative actions out there,
Okay.
and all that. And the word got back from my company commander, Captain Wilcox, was a good officer. He has the maturity and all that about him that inspired confidence in him. And not once has he ever criticized any of my actions, whereas he did criticize the actions of some of the other platoon commanders. Neither when I had the machine gun platoon nor when I had the rifle platoon was he ever critical of anything. So anyway, at least he felt I was his best platoon commander. It just came down to that. And when he was wounded and evacuated, the executive officer, Joe Casaba, an old Mustang, took over the company. And Joe was a good, stable officer, but he was no military genius. And I always felt that he should speak up more, because when he's called us together, and at that time someone had broke out a Coleman lantern, and I was looking at the map. The map was a small-scale map, really not a good tactical map. The scale was 1 to 50,000. It was hard to look at the contour lines, even in daylight.
Yeah.
And at nighttime, in dim light, it's almost impossible, but at least you can determine the terrain features. But he pointed out the area that we were to traverse at a different azimuth. And I knew that it was inadequately planned. The signals provided were ridiculous. I did not have time. One of the most complex operations would be a night operations. And here we're going 5 miles away without a proper map reconnaissance, no physical reconnaissance of main terrain features to determine obstacles and all that, no planning of checkpoints or what have you, phase lines are not applicable in this case. And because we had to move in single file, the only security we had in this single file, the whole battalion moving, was darkness and silence, because the terrain was too difficult to move in other than a single file. People would be lost, there would be delays and all that. We cannot send out flank security, but I was confident at the point that my platoon can take care of anything that happened. Mm-hmm. And if it's too big for us to handle, at least we can at least fix the enemy, and for the company to deploy and do what it was. But I found that it was a mission impossible because of many factors. The physical condition of the men they were physically exhausted at that point in time, and yet they were dealt a double load of heavier load, double load of ammunition and everything else, because we would be up there. They would be burdened down. Marines carrying 100 pounds. Mm. I weighed, by that time, my peak fighting strength was 130 pounds.
And you were carrying 100 in addition to
that? No,
that?
I was not carrying 100.
Okay.
I was carrying 60 to 70 pounds.
Okay.
That is still a heavy load for me because by that time my weight was down to, they weighed me when I was evacuated in Japan. I weighed 118 pounds because we had nothing to eat but dry crackers and chewy orange candy. And anyway, so the men were carrying a tremendous load in addition to their own weapons and all that. They had to carry extra boxes of machine gun ammo and extra mortar ammo because we had to be independent. The second factor, negative factor, was that no idea of the enemy situation. Here we're going forward without knowing about the enemy. And that was why when we kicked off, whereas all the people in this long column which extended back half a mile, and they were walking in lockstep, but with me at the front and all, my people were not in a march. We were in attack mode from the very beginning, all the way to Fox Company. And the signals given and all that, as I said, were ridiculous.
Yeah.
The artillery will fire flares, illuminating rounds into the skies, and to guide us, or they in exactly in the azimuth behind us, supporting us. And number two, if you fire a flare up there, it would destroy your visual purple, which is your night vision and all that. And I want my night vision to be preserved so I can see the enemy and all that. I totally disregarded this. If you take an azimuth following the flare, which would be buffeted back and forth by the wind and all that, and floating this way or that way, it's totally unreliable, And so this type of instruction. And the other was that they would fire white phosphorus on the hills. Or we in a grandstand on top so we could see the white phosphorus exploding on the ground. Once you're in a valley or depth, you can't see these things. It's absolutely useless and all that. So I maintain, and the other point here, see those two stars out there? Providence has put it that they were right over Fox Hill. Be guided by those stars and you would be headed straight for Fox Hill. And
did you know that, or are you just saying that?
No, this was told to me, and I hate to say it, by the battalion commander. And I didn't ask him. I said, Colonel, are you going to stop the Earth from rotating? The only star that was constant was behind us. We were heading south, and all that. So things like this, I totally disregarded, and I had to use my own judgment, my own initiative, and everything else like that. And
so, how long did it take you? How long did it take you to make this journey?
To make this journey?
Yes.
We kicked off at 9 o'clock. In a blizzard, and I had to tell my men that they would be no more than almost within touching distance of each other. I don't want anybody lost for even if he were to step out of line. And I had two scouts with me, but I had the compass, and I found that the terrain was unknown and difficult, with crevices and deep valleys here and there, and you can't go on a straight line. And that that film indicated that I had to halt the column for a long time, and Joe was saying, Joe Owen was saying that I had to halt the column to look at the compass. That wasn't the reason I halted the column. It was whenever there was a halt, it was because of treacherous unknown ground that I and my scouts had to physically trump the snow areas to see whether there was a deep drop or a hole or what have you. And that took time. And whenever we did that, I was fully conscious that those poor people back in the column had to stand and freeze. They could not stomp, make noise or what have you. And they had this heavy load that they could not afford to lay down because they wouldn't be able to put it back up again.
So there was a lot of snow on the ground? Or it varied?
It varies.
In terms of the terrain?
In crossing the field up there, it was up above my knees and all that, but we had to break trails and all that. And land navigation routes were totally out because normally when they said that to skirt an obstacle, terrain obstacle, you're taking azimuth and go so many paces this way and all that. And you keep track of this because ultimately you want to go back to your original azimuth course. Right. Otherwise you would be off.
Now you were going to tell me how long this took.
We had to stop. We started at 9 o'clock and we had to stop at 2 o'clock. The column, the battalion commander halted us. Not once during all this time did anybody give me instructions and all, other than at the very beginning. So at 2 o'clock, and we stopped for about 2 or 3 hours and moved out again in the morning at daybreak. Mm-hmm. And when we move out, the first platoon, rather the third platoon this time was ahead of my platoon, but I was immediately following behind. And when daylight, dawn broke, so you could see a little bit, the head of the column came under heavy enemy fire. The Chinese detected us, and it was pinned down, and I had to move my platoon forward, and I knew that I felt I could reestablish fire superiority, and that the Rocky UMass was just about 500 or 600 yards away, very steep going up there. But what I wanted to do was to deploy my men in the skirmish line and open fire on my signal with a full volume of fire. I had one machine gun left on the flank, and on my signal, open fire and immediately start the assault, and to maintain fire with the marching fire to enemies to keep their heads down. They continue to fire at points, but not in the big volume to stop us. Yeah. So move up there in the attack, carrying our heavy loads up there in a very steep hill. And that was when I felt so tired and thought it was, am I getting old or what? I was 24 at that time. And my legs felt like blocks of lead, and I had to will it forward, and almost painful to go up there. And my men were on line with me, and they were carrying a much heavier load, and they broke out in whoops and hollers like they were in a big game, and rushed toward the crest. They were magnificent. these Marines. And then we killed about a dozen of the enemy in that area and captured 3 of them. But all the positions were actually on the reverse side of that ridge line.
Oh.
And that they were facing towards the main service road.
So you were coming up behind them?
We were actually approaching from behind them. And for the first time, they had broke and ran. They were about 500 or 600 yards down in this wide snowfield, staggered lines, about 18 or 20 of them, floundering, just running, plowing through the snow. And my men, of course, pursued them by fire and all that. And I hate to say it, from my glasses I could see that our bullets were falling way behind them. Maybe it's the elevation, whatever, the visibility and all that.
Yeah.
But and I looked back down the hill and because I felt very exhilarated because number one, my Marines accomplished the mission in a clear-cut victory.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost classic in its success.
Yeah.
And all the men with me were ones who started with me back at Camp Pendleton. The fillers, replacements that we had, before we went on this night attack, they pulled in people from the 81 motors, from the artillery, and did different rear areas to fill in. And all those people, they were out there the same time we were, but they were strewn down out there, petered out. They couldn't keep up and all that. But I was never more proud of my men. These reservists, some of them had no training, and here they were, lean, mean, as professional as any of the other regular Marines up there, and they were all Marines as far as I was concerned. And from that point on, that was the last fight that we had.
Yeah. And you were wounded shortly after you finished the march, or was it?
No.
No.
Hold
on. I'm going to set your tape here, and then we'll get back and finish the story. All right.
Yes, it was really interesting.
Okay, this is part 3 of our interview with Major Kert chew-een Lee. We're at the Library of Congress, and it's June 24th, 2010. Major, you were just about to tell us about the completion of your mission in the last fighting that you did in Korea, but you were wounded a second time after this fighting. Could you tell us how that happened?
I was wounded the second time after from Fox Hill we had reached Hagaru, and from there move on down to Coterie, and had to fight all the way down there because we were on the western race lines and all, and it was the final breakout from Coterie that we encountered enemy positions that were very strong, and at the same time a blizzard started coming down and we could not see the enemy, and but apparently they had registered their fire down at a crucial juncture of the road, and so they could fire in the snow and hit that particular juncture where we had a tank and all, and I was trying to, my men were pinned down with a very heavy fire, and I was pulling them back into better position, and then I was moving back to the tank in order to try to use their phone to direct their fire at the direction of the enemy. When the enemy personal machine gun fires registered at that point, struck me. One splattered against the tank and hit me in the face, and the other shattered my right arm. And my men came in and pulled me to the side and tried to dress my wounds. It was totally useless, my right arm. And they pulled my pack from me, but I was able to walk. And so I went back to the aid station where they strapped me to a stretcher out there. And that was the coldest day. That was when the temperature really went down. I guess wind chill went down to about 60 or 70 degrees. But early the next morning, when the weather cleared, I was evacuated by air.
Okay. Before we continue with that, as I understand it, you had become the commander just before you were wounded.
Yes, the company commander, Lieutenant Kert, was killed in action at that point in time, and Joe Owens was with him, and battalion was taken over by a Major Webb Sawyer, and he knew me. He was the one who welcomed me to the battalion, and he was told that I would be the new company commander. But that lasted no more than 10 or 15 minutes. Because then that was when I was shot.
Yeah. So you were evacuated by helicopter?
No, I was evacuated by, I think, one of these C-54s.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And were you taken to?
I was taken to Kobe.
Okay. Japan.
Japan.
How long were you there?
Well, I was hoping that I would be there for a nice tour of Japan, but instead they evacuated me and the next day direct to the States. And first to the Okinawa Hospital, and then where my mother got to visit me there, and then out to Philadelphia Naval Hospital where I was hospitalized for about 6 months.
And did you regain use of your arm?
Yes. I was considered fit for duty and was sent back to the Fleet Marine Force and joined the 2nd Marine Division and was assigned to the reconnaissance company of the 2nd Marine Division. Spent 3 or 4 years there with various command assignments and the important experience of being the operations officer, the S3 of a battalion.
Good. Before we move on, because I want to talk about your time in Vietnam as well, I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about one last kind of point about Korea. You've alluded to this several times. You've talked about the snow, you've talked about the cold. Describe what it was like being there, especially around Chosin, because that was the cold, one of the coldest times of the year and one of the coldest winters Korea had in a long time. Just tell me a little bit about what it was like dealing with the cold as a Marine and as a fighting person and as just a human being on a day-to-day basis.
Well, many of the Marines suffered very serious cold injury out there, or frostbite with the gangrene and all that, with really disabled. I did not suffer too much because I felt I was adequately clothed and all that, and my men also, many of them, very few were involved with frostbite because they were properly trained to move their toes and fingers at any stop and all. But to me personally, for some reason, while in the chosen reservoir, my mind was very clear and sharp, and it was things came very easy because we're dealing with life and death, and there's none of these stupid politics involved. There's one-upmanship of people and all. Everywhere they was looking for a leader,
Yeah.
and so to me it was a very gratifying experience.
Mm-hmm. And did you feel that the Marines that you were with were equipped in terms of clothing to handle the cold? I know that I've heard some stories about Korea where some of the soldiers, some of the other fighting men over there said that they didn't have adequate boots or socks. But were you all right on that level?
I think basically the Marines had adequate winter clothing except for the footgear. The shoe pack that they wore did not provide much protection. They created conditions for freezing more than anything else because of sweating and everything else like that.
Sure.
And that was the biggest flaw. Otherwise, with the heavy parkas and coats and everything else, I felt it was adequate.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on and talk a little bit about your service during the Vietnam War. What did that involve? You did serve overseas, right?
Yes, that followed my my stint at training the young officers for 27 months, one after each other, to qualify for infantry platoon commanders, and most were sent to Vietnam, and I was sent after them to be assigned to Vietnam and landed with the first major Marine forces to land in Vietnam.
What year is this?
That was in 1995. Served there
You said 1995. You mean 1965?
Correction.
Right.
Excuse me. 1965 to
Right.
1966.
Uh-huh.
And I was assigned as my first intelligence assignment. As a matter of fact, I requested it.
Mm-hmm.
I was the 3rd Marine Division Combat Intelligence Officer during my tour out there.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you in country?
About a year.
Mm-hmm. And did you say where you were stationed?
I was stationed at Da Nang, and our area of operations for intelligence purposes ran from Phu Bai down to Chu Lai, Da Nang area.
Okay. And what was do you have any specific memories about Vietnam? I know a lot of people say, is that kind of popular memory that people say when you get off that plane in Vietnam, it's so hot, it's so intense, it's so noisy. Was that your kind of experience?
Well, it certainly was a hot place and all. And my first impression was the sound of the South Vietnamese voices, the lilt and their tonal inflections and all, which was different to me, and which I became accustomed later on. They all talk that way, even the Vietnamese here in the States. But it was an experience in which, for the first time, the Marines wore the heavy flak jackets, they call them, and all that. I never wore it on my body, on the jeeps and all that. I used it as a seat padding. I don't want to be hurt anywhere down there.
I see.
Yeah.
You wouldn't mind getting wounded in the chest, but
no.
if something happened to your
Yeah.
rear, that would be much worse. You were in the Marines until 1960. You said the end of 1968. Is that right? All right. And did you decide to retire? Was there a special reason you decided to retire?
I decided to retire 6 months early because I was not picked up for lieutenant colonel.
I see.
And I could have stayed in until June, but I just wanted to get my 25 years in, and when that was reached, I retired.
Okay. Let me ask you a couple of general questions. One is about your status as an Asian, as a Chinese American. You mentioned very early on in this interview that you were the only Asian in your unit when you were in basic training. Is that right?
Yes.
And did that continue along the way in the Marine Corps? Did you see very many other Chinese Americans or other Asian Americans in the Marines while you were in?
Well, there were more coming in. Even after my return from Korea, there was a Chinese American. Strangely, his name also was Lee, Thomas Lee, who joined, of all places, the 7th Marines. But he was wounded out there and had a Purple Heart. That's all I knew. And he retired also as a major. But there are increasingly more Asian Americans coming into the Marine Corps, but not that many.
Yeah. Did you ever feel that you were treated any differently because of your ethnic background?
Certainly, I cannot deny that fact. I felt that I had to work harder to gain the same credit for my efforts than the so-called representative Marine officers, the white officers, and all that. And but again, it's because of my personal attitude that I was very reserved and did not tolerate many friends. And when they offered me my qualifications to become friends, of course, I have quite a number of good friends and supporters in the Marine Corps.
Could you talk a little bit, you have a lot of your decorations you're wearing today. Could you talk maybe about two of them, the two that you're most proud of?
Well, the two top ones I have, one is the Navy Cross, which I got for the Sudan operation. And citations are curious things. They don't always reflect what happened on the ground. My citation for the Navy Cross had me, try to provoke enemy fire, but also that after being wounded and all that, I charged into the enemy fire and inspired all the Marines to follow me, and that I was, despite my being wounded, but I was not wounded until after pretty much a solitary effort out there, and not a platoon effort. Mm-hmm. So there was that difference. The Silver Star was something sort of a sore point. It was received 6 years after the Chosin Reservoir, and
why was there such a delay?
Many of the men thought that the Navy Cross was for the Chosin Reservoir, and so they felt that I deserved something more, but that at least he had the Navy Cross, and when they heard I had the Silver Star, and 6 years late, and I've been wearing just a Purple Heart for 6 years, while I got involved with this reserve colonel and troubles and all that. That the Silver Star awarded earlier probably would have, my career would have gone in another direction. And so there's a movement on the foot here to try to have this Silver Star upgraded.
Oh, okay. What's the progress on that?
Well, this is something that I finally acceded to, and I think there would be a good chance that it would be upgraded at least to another Navy Cross.
Looking back on the totality of your life, what would you say the role your serving in the military played? What difference did it make in your life?
Well, it vindicated what I always thought, that it was natural to have a martial spirit, and that it was a proper choice for a career. If I had not been a Marine, I probably would have been idling someplace as an artist, doing paintings and all that, which actually was one of my true latent talents. But the Marine Corps my life has been totally identified with the Marine Corps. And even though for a long time I was not actually involved with, for personal reasons, with Marine veterans organizations and all that, and I have a lot of former comrades in bigger company who keep pushing me so that I cannot but remain very much involved with the Marines and the Marine Corps, and interested in its continuation as an elite organization.
Is there anything else that you would like to say, or any experiences that maybe we didn't get to that you'd like to talk about before we wrap this up?
No, not in particular. I think I said too much.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah. We really thank you for your service to your country and for talking with us today at the Veterans History Project.
This is Captain Sergeant Morozov. I've just taken over for the interviewer that just left. I'm with Congressman Conaway's office. Still sitting in the same room with Jamie Stevenson and Captain Frankie Collier from 3-5. I am a Marine Fellow as well, and that is probably the main reason why I became involved with this interview, and I've been fortunate to meet you, sir, and I'll be able to talk to you, and I have some more questions. I've read Colder Than Hell. I've read Breakout. One of the things from Colder Than Hell especially that always captivated me, and which I used for leadership classes and instruction with my subordinate Marines, was the way you handled yourself, the way you carried yourself, conducted yourself as an officer, and the way you trained your Marines. You stood out from everybody else in the book. You've alluded to it, talking about Joe Owen and his kind of informal nature with some of his mortarmen. But you were known as a much more, rigid might be an appropriate term, but just a by-the-book guy, but it worked and it was the right thing to do. And there was, the sense I got from the book, there was some animosity towards you for your rigid style. But after the fighting had commenced, people saw the reason for doing that and really respected you, and were thankful after the fact for the way that you had trained them and worked with them. Could you talk about that?
Well, I think it's natural for people to resist change, even though what they're doing may not be the proper thing or correct thing and all. For example, I'm talking about the platoon that I took over in combat, the 2nd Rifle Platoon, and going to Korea. I noticed that its platoon commander was always flaked out on his rack reading Pope stories, and probably leaving his platoon sergeant to do the training. And this officer had experience, Pacific War experience, and I often wonder, what is it? Is he a lazy slob, or is he that much confident and proficient, and his men were that well trained that he could afford to do this and all that? But when I took over the platoon, it's quite clear that he was not well trained, and I was forced to engage in training, so to speak, at a time when we're back from patrols or what have you, and the troops were rather rest, and I did give them rest and all that, but also at the first opportunity, they had to go through some drills to be sure that they don't commit the same errors from my observation in their last patrol, things like that. And I could see that some of them, they could not express their resentment or displeasure because I would not permit it. But I think that by and large, they all recognize by the time I left that I was their leader. One of my best corporals was Jerry Hogan, and he has written me a letter saying that, if you excuse the term, he said, your leadership scared me shitless, but when I saw you go down, I was never more scared in my life, because you are no longer with us. And I thought that was a compliment.
There's a saying that we use, you probably use the same thing, that the best form of troop welfare is quality training. And sometimes the best kind of love is tough love. And I thought your story manifested that, and I use it as an example. I also remember in Owen's book, it talked about training your machine gun section, or your platoon. Other platoons might be going on liberty or taking it easy in the squad bay. You guys were out running gun drills up the Camp Pendleton Hills before you got on ship. Is that how it happened?
Well, I think most illustrative of this aspect of training was when we were in Japan, and for 2 days out there, and the troops were allowed liberty for a few hours and all that, but I felt that my machine gunners cannot afford liberty. They did not have liberty. They were out there having gun drill throughout the time we were in Japan, and I suppose some of them were unhappy over that, but I think that it paid off, and they knew it paid off in actual combat. It was hard to conduct gun drill on the concrete decks of the docks and all that, and so I had one of my men scout out a proper area, and there was one not far away, a small field, but the mortar section of Able Company was out there playing grab ass with a ball sock as a football or something like that. So I brought my platoon out there and told the lieutenant, first lieutenant, big loudmouth from Boston, I remember that quite well, that I need the field for training. And he said, well, we got it here first. We finish our training. And I said, you either get off the field or I'll run my men through you people. And he knew that he was junior to me, and that was the main reason. so he said some expletives and had his men leave the field. And my men had some gun drill anyway, Fallout 1 and all that kind of business, and displacing positions to alternate position, and before we landed. And I thought it benefited my men. That's all.
Some of the, I mean, to this day, when I've been on ship before, tried to train Marines, and to this day we have those same challenges trying to find the space on Navy ships, and you can't get out on patrol, you can't walk around, so you have to do things on chalkboards or use terrain models.
Yeah.
Is that what you did on the way to Korea? With the space that you had, you just tried to kind of maybe do tactical decision games, talk through scenarios?
Well, we didn't have chalkboards or anything else like that and all. So I tried the best to provide a verbal picture of situations and all that. And my technique is always to ask direct questions to be sure that the troopers are listening. So all of them try to get something, and instead of doze off or what have you.
One thing I've always been concerned with as a Marine commander, as a leader, is stifling initiative. Were you ever concerned that your directive leadership style was going to stifle your subordinates' initiative or their ability to make decisions or come to you with questions? Was that ever a concern that you had?
My concern has been the eroding of the basic principles of leadership. A few years back, some officer wrote about the need for humbleness in leadership. And how could you have humbleness to be an effective leader? You certainly appreciate the input of other people, and you should always solicit input from others. But to be humble and to apologize on this or that, that to me is totally a loss of character. And once the troopers feel that, oh, he's humble, then it's pretty hard to think of him as inspiring and all that. And one must exercise leadership, not only knowing about the principles of leadership and all that. One must always seize the initiative to apply leadership. As an example, I made a comment about the company commander that we had after the captain was wounded. And I always felt that he never gave me any orders or anything else like that. And he always tried to allude, battalion wants this and all that. And he didn't have the guts to say, I'm the company commander, I want you to do this, and so forth. And we were moving from Hagaru towards Coterie, and we were fighting all day on the high ground. And then towards nightfall, we had the lieutenant, Joe Sabre. He was killed eventually, but he called the platoon leaders together. It was getting to be pitch black, and he said that battalion wants us to move down to the road, and he wants us to move down in a skirmish line. And I said, God damn it, Joe. He said, what? I said, the first principle of night operations is control. And the maximum control you have is by a column formation. And I said, there's no way that the enemy would be disposed along this virtually 45-degree grade out there. And if I spread my men out in a skirmish line, I would lose half of them in the darkness, you know. And he said, well, that's what battalion wanted. And so I said, aye, aye, sir. And I called my platoon sergeant over to bring the squad leaders. And just at the time, a voice broke out from the darkness. It said, just a minute, Mr. Kaseba. Have your men moved down in a column. It was the battalion commander. Now, Joe could have made this comment in the meeting, briefing, order time when the battalion commander pressed the order, but he didn't open his mouth. And this is why I say that every officer in the exercise of leadership must exercise initiative if it is for the good of the mission, and it is obligatory for him to speak up. And once the decision is made, of course, you follow whatever contrary instructions are given, but you should give yourself the opportunity to be of some good with initiative.
Sir. I think, to me, from what I've read and I've heard from you and I understand, you trained your Marines, both platoons that you trained, very effectively. What kind of training did you receive in the late 40s to be an infantry platoon commander? And do you think it was inadequate for the war that you got into later? Did you have to self-teach yourself additional stuff through reading? How did that work?
No, at the basic school, the first basic class that I attended, I'm sure they modified the instructions later. My class had plenty of schoolwork, school solutions, and all that stuff, you know. And we applied it pretty much, although we had to use the golf course, for example, for terrain appreciation. I'm talking about Quantico, you know, rolling hills or what have you out there. And we never had anything like the sand tables and all this other fancy stuff that's very interesting that the basic school now has. And, but I felt confident that I got enough to be an effective platoon leader.
Does that include, machine gunnery is a very technical, I think with a lot of tactics there's a little more of an art to it, as far as you're going to go left, you're going to go right, you got to feel the enemy out, judge the situation. But the firing and employment of machine guns, I think, is a more scientific discipline. How did you learn what you needed to know to be a machine gun platoon commander? Did you learn that in your infantry training, or was that stuff that you taught yourself?
No. When I went through basic school training, as a matter of fact, when I took over the phase 2 tactics, which is platoon tactics and all, at that point in time, the graduates from the basic school were qualified as machine gun platoon commanders, whether heavy machine guns or light machine guns, 81 mortar commanders or rifle platoon commanders. And I understand it's quite different nowadays, that you don't get that heavy dosage of infantry training while you're in proper basic school curriculum, and that they wait until you're assigned the MOS, and then you go to your specialties and so forth. if this is true, I don't think it is right. I think every graduate from the basic school, before they go into any specialized training, even going through the advanced infantry course, should be able and should have the confidence to run a rifle platoon. The very least, and it includes the women, is to know how to deploy the men in a perimeter defense, base defense, and how to establish fields of fire and all that. And I don't know whether the women today, for example, are given this type of training while they're at basic school.
They were 10 years ago when I went through it. I think that they wouldn't have that heavy weapons expertise, but they do have the ability to employ rifle squads and platoon. I think that's still there.
That's good.
It's interesting hearing you talk about the platoon commander that was in his rack while his platoon trained themselves, essentially didn't train at all. You see a guy's a veteran, he gets this mystique, this aura around him, and people wonder about all this awesome stuff that he possibly knows, and he's not doing anything, so should I be, what am I doing wrong? And you see the same thing today with the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have lieutenants checking into battalions, half the NCOs are veterans, but that doesn't always mean anything. They might have done things wrong when they're the first time, just got lucky. They might have been in an area where there wasn't much contact in the first place. So something I think most lieutenants figure out after the first couple months is the training that they get is first rate in Quantico, and you just do the right thing, do what you've been taught, train your Marines properly, you'll probably be successful in the long run.
Well, this is true. When I had that instructional group at Quantico, in that group were 3 majors and 7 captains. But in a sense, it was like I felt sometimes like I was a lion tamer coming through there because they wanted to do this or that differently, and I said, "You do it this way." And I had to correct one officer whose experience in Korea, for example, was entirely on the bunker warfare and all that stuff. And to me, he knew nothing about combat formations and all that. And his big stress, and I had to talk to him more one-on-one later, that he's got to reorient himself. This is just one aspect of warfare, bunker warfare, and that they should know about it. But he should open himself up to the regular classic tactical formations and all that, because they all apply.
I'm assuming that if I asked you about the highlight of your career, what you're most proud of, you'd probably refer to your time in Korea. Is that correct?
No, the most meaningful contribution, I think, was my time at Quantico. That was when I had reports from officers. There was one lieutenant who was the captain when he decided to leave the Marine Corps, and he approached me. I was major at the time, and asked that I join him because he's entering the CIA, and he became the top director of the operations.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He was the top spy and everything else. Very famous career.
Did you think about doing it?
No.
Maybe.
No.
If you could go back and change anything in your career in general, or just in Korea, as far as decisions you made or things you did or didn't do, what would that be?
The main thing is that a man cannot be an island unto himself. I was too proud to seek advice from people, and I prefer to save my prestige by learning things the hard way, or do the reading myself and doing things. It's a lot easier if you open yourself and seek a mentor. And even if, and most officers are happy to devote their time to help you. I never did that. I was too much a loner because I don't want to embarrass myself with people, show my ignorance, and all that. And this is why I'm usually reticent unless I know something of what I'm talking about. And I have too many friends who has a smattering of knowledge, and suddenly he's the language expert on talking about this and that, or whatever area, and so forth. Yeah, to open myself up a little more, and also, if you have a significant person in your life, to devote your time to this person, whether it's a wife or girlfriend or what have you, because you may never have the opportunity if suddenly that life is taken.
You talked about some of your motivations, for your actions. I tried to look at what set you apart and what motivated you to lead the way that you led. And I've got a theory that boot camp's good training, OCS is good, but most Marines are made at home by their parents. That's where I think a man gets the basic tools that he needs to stand out in his formative years from his folks. It's possible to take somebody from the wrong side of the tracks that had no positive role models and make them into a successful Marine in boot camp, but generally speaking, I think the home is where that starts, where that's built, and I think that seems like was your situation. It seemed like you had a great role model in both your parents, so you were well prepared for success. You were set up for success in the Marine Corps, and you talked about at the panel discussion about your motivation as far as the cultural motivation. You wanted to, as a Chinese American, you wanted to have a good showing when you're in Korea. One more thing that I've seen, talking about my contemporary experience, is the guys that kind of missed the first fight had that extra motivation when they get to Iraq. So all the guys that weren't a part of the invasion in 2003, they felt left out. So when they got over there in 04, 05, they had that. It seemed like an extra bit of urgency, or some of them bordered on recklessness, to be honest, to get in front of men and to say follow me and to lead the way. Do you think you had a similar effect from World War II when they kept you stateside, against your desires? They kept you stateside to work with the languages. Did that motivate you when you got to Korea? Like you finally had the chance you've been waiting for, and you weren't going to waste it?
No. What is the
question is, I'm wondering, did your World War II experience, did that have an impact or a motivation on, how did that impact you or affect you later on?
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Because of my inaction in World War II.
Right.
And I was trying to overdo it, perhaps, and make it up for it. No, that had no impact whatsoever. I was more motivated in ensuring that I get involved in a regular command type environment because of my observation of in World War II of a sprinkling of Chinese Americans, maybe they were actually Chinese academics who were appointed as Marine Corps lieutenants. At that time, the Marine Corps recruited a fairly large group of scholars and academics and all that in anticipation of landing in China, that the Marines would be fighting the Japanese army in China, or to recoup weapons and disarm them or what have you. And so these Chinese Americans were called specialists. And I don't know how many there were, maybe 20, 25 at Cambridge, and I observed them. And they wore Marine Corps uniforms with specialists.
Like the Army? Is it a teardrop?
Spell out as specialists.
Okay.
And but they were language specialists. They wore Marine enlisted uniforms. However, they were given the privilege of eating in the officers' mess. Okay, strange, but they were known as civilians basically. But they appointed a handful of maybe 2 or 3 lieutenants to honcho these people, and but unfortunately they did not give these lieutenants any officer training, and they're not qualified to be staff officers other than to control or direct a group of translators and interpreters and all. And the impression they gave as an officer was, to me, very shameful. They did not comport themselves with, you don't expect them to have command presence, what have you, but at least, I don't know, they shouldn't act like fools. And enlisted men coming up and slap them, hey, Wong, how are things doing? And not salute them, for example. And they would smile and happy, ingratiated that the Marines accepted them, you know, that. No concept whatsoever of what an officer is. And when I became commissioned, the aftertaste of these officers was very strong, because I encountered some Marines who probably had some licenses, officers like that. And I had to jack them up everywhere, even when I was in China. And the word gets around. But
I always thought it was always funny to me that once you became an officer, they being the Marine Corps or leadership, seemed like they were constantly trying to put you into an intelligence type billet or use you as a translator or a linguist, and you had to actively resist that, and you fought it every step of the way. You finally got a platoon in Korea, and you get over there, and you're their best. Well, you're their most effective fighter, to be sure. One of the top men they had as far as combat leaders. I always thought that was very ironic. You know, how would things have been if you'd ended up working in the intel section for 1-7? History would have been different. Quite
right.
possibly.
And I was prepared to make it clear that I don't want to be an instructor, but I found that was not necessary, because I was welcomed aboard by 3 people. Tom Tye, the S3, Webb Sawyer, the exec, he died a brigadier, and Ray Davis, the battalion commander. And all 3 of them welcomed me aboard, and I said, I want to join a rifle company. They said, you have it. No questions asked. He should say, oh, well, you should be in. Wouldn't you feel better being in S2? You know.
So you were expecting them to try and put you in the S2 shop?
I would expect that.
Right.
And, because one battalion commander I had early, the one in China, 2-5, 2nd Battalion, and I knew him at Camp Lejeune. Big family, big churchgoer. He has a weak, jowly face and all that. And he wanted me to be in the S2 section in the battalion. And once we were in Japan, we had an officer, Jefferson, who was a Japanese Japan missionary. His parents, white parents, were missionaries, speaks excellent native Japanese. And once we were in Japan, en route to China, stayed over there a day or two. And this battalion commander, well, Jefferson, guided us to this big geisha place and restaurant and all. And but to me, it was not a geisha place. It was a jaroya. It was a house of prostitution. Because after eating and all that, and then the waitresses would slide it, something up. and the officer would go over there and bed down someplace, and this battalion commander was there, and he napped virtually every one of these waitresses. None of them want to go with him. But the fact was that he, the big family man, big churchgoer, was open to all this type of stuff and all that.
Ironic.
It's very ironic.
Sad, but ironic. In my experience, I think that one thing that separates men from the boys is the cold. You got big tough guys that talk a lot about what they're going to do when they get into combat, and they get over there and it's freezing cold and they vanish. They're hiding at the bottom of a hole somewhere, the warmest spot they could find. What kind of challenges did you have due to the cold? I remember there's in Colder Than Hell, there's a part in the book, I think it might have been the last platoon, or there's that first night, or that night when the company was attacked and there's guys in the bag that got bayoneted, and that was the last time that the Marines from Baker 17 got in their bags. What kind of challenge?
This black sergeant I mentioned, who was killed in his sleeping bag, he was bayoneted to death. And
in the defense, for example, did you have to walk the lines more often, and were you kicking Marines in the back of the head, where your NCOs were? How much of a challenge was it to keep guys doing the right thing in the cold and not going internal? Or was that something that kind of corrected itself and people just knew that it was life and death, and if they didn't fix themselves, then they'd be killed?
Well, I think in a static situation, probably some of these officers would think of themselves and their own personal warmth and all that, instead of exposing themselves to further cold by checking on the alertness or disposition of people out on the line. But I always stress the responsibilities of NCOs and all that. You don't have to do everything yourself, but and you don't have to talk to every man. you talk to the NCOs, and they better know the situation of the men, and which one was prone to be a dozer or what have you, malinger and all that. How's he doing? And force them to get involved and all that. All you have to do is to know something, and I learned a lot from going through record books and find out who the troublemakers are, and also through every NCO's service record book, and I know how they're generally regarded in the Marine Corps, and plus points or minus points and so forth, and praise them for the plus, continue to build in the minus points. As long as they are aware that you know something about them, then they're a little more careful. And because one should know his men.
Sir, we about done? Sir, that's all the questions that I had for you, except for one more, and that is there anything you'd want to share, or any final thoughts, any advice for today's Marines?
Well, I think today's Marines are quite fortunate. Most of them are better selected and were exposed to better education and to, I would say, modernity. They're up to snuff with the latest electronics and things like that, and that they therefore should be in a better position to absorb any new information with military equipment, in whether weapons or electronics or things like that, and but that they should not let this go to their head, and that in the future warfare would be any different from what it has been in past wars. In a sense, is a largely untested area, because we don't know how all this modern equipment and inventions and all that would pan out when the enemy is trying to foil the operation of equipments like this and all. So it is very, very important to me that the modern day Marines know all the basic rules on being an effective Marine, to know how to read a map and to know some basics of scouting and patrolling and all the basics and all that, and use of a compass and all. And they should not rely on gadgetry other than to know that this device is not fail-safe, and it could become a useless obstacle in your hand, actually. And but otherwise, I think from what I have observed, the Marine today, the enlisted men and the young officers are every bit as quality a military person as the Marines in the past, and that they should always bear in mind these traditions that they must maintain, and they cannot go wrong, and they must learn how to take care of each other and not think of themselves individually.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for paving the way for us.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming by today and doing the interview and having breakfast and meeting the boss. It's a good day.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.